Like most new media, games have experienced their share of growing pains. We've had them all. Video games cause violent behavior, video games encourage crime, video games cause addiction, video games socially cripple children, video games cause obesity, this game's a porn simulator, that game's a murder simulator, games cause this or that school shooting. Good times. If we are to grow as a medium and evolve into something with the social, artistic, and commercial reach of other mass media, we must be willing to stand up as an industry and defend works of merit, rather than meekly abandon them whenever objections are raised.
That was a clip from a YouTube video put up back in 2012 by the channel Extra Credits. They're a video game discussion channel that has spent years standing up for the gaming medium. And because of well-written videos like that one, their channel has amassed over 2 million subscribers. But so far this month, over 20,000 people have decided their content is no longer worth watching. Because since 2012, Extra Credits seems to have gone through an ideological shift. The values they formerly championed have been abandoned for a more politically correct message, leading to videos like this one titled, "Stop Normalizing Nazis."
There you are, playing the PvP in your World War II shooter, and all of a sudden, you're a Nazi. You didn't ask for this. You didn't choose this. Yet there it is. And it's treated no differently than playing a British soldier.
Gosh, I never realized how oppressive video games can be. You choose to buy a game which you know includes Nazis, and at some point in the game, you end up playing as a Nazi. Who could have seen that coming? If only there were ways to find out more about a game before you buy it.
This is bad on so many levels. No one should ever have a random chance of fighting for the Nazis. And we should never express that there's no meaningful difference between Nazis and Allied soldiers, or that they're functionally interchangeable.
You do realize video games are fantasy, right? You're not literally fighting on behalf of Nazis, you're playing a fictional game in which one team has a Nazi skin. Obviously, Nazis and allies aren't interchangeable in real life, but in the realm of fiction, they can be.
And before anyone equivocates and says not all German soldiers in World War II were Nazis, if they were wearing the swastika and are functioning as an arm of the Nazi government, then unless the game goes out of its way to tell you specifically that your particular character is not a Nazi, then they're a Nazi.
If you fought in the US Army under Obama, that means you're a Democrat. If you were still in the Army when Trump got elected, now you're Republican. That is your argument right now. But even if your character is a Nazi, you are a fictional Nazi. Like how in Payday you're a fictional robber, or in GTA you're a fictional gang member, or in Hitman you are a fictional hitman. You get the point.
Oh, and on a similar note, let's please stop forcing people to play as terrorists as well. There you are, playing your modern shooter, and all of a sudden you're a terrorist. You didn't ask for this, you didn't choose this, and yet second verse, same as the first. There it is. I mean, that's literally the name of your side in the game.
Is this really a common complaint in the gaming community? Based on the like to dislike ratio, I'm gonna press X to doubt.
Even if you put aside all of the people who have had traumatic experiences with these groups, who have lost loved ones to terrorists, or who have had generations of their families wiped out by Nazis, no one should have to put on the costume of an ideology they find abhorrent without actually opting into it in your game.
Yes, people have been victimized by Nazis and terrorists, just like some people have been victimized by gang members and robbers, but how is that the game's fault? The video game didn't cause that to happen, and those people have no obligation to buy that game or watch gameplay of it.
And by making people do so, we get them to stop thinking about it, to stop thinking of the meaning behind these things. We normalize them.
Does Extra Credits think there's no other venue out there where we're told about Nazis? Video games do not exist in a vacuum. Throughout our schooling, we are repeatedly taught about the atrocities committed by Nazis during World War II. The film industry spent decades making numerous movies about how evil they are. Developers don't put Nazis in games because we don't know they're bad, but because we do know they're bad.
We make them just window dressing for entertainment. Those uniforms, those symbols, become things that no longer inherently revolt us. They reduce our visceral reaction to seeing the embodiment of these ideologies.
How dare you separate fantasy from reality and not be perpetually offended? If you gunned on a character in GTA and it doesn't give you a panic attack, that means your visceral reaction is being reduced. We make murder just window dressing for entertainment. We normalize it. You know, I feel like I've heard this argument before, but I can't quite put my finger on where.
Now, does this make us totally ignore the history that comes with them? No. But for some people, it moves them from the territory of revolting to just edgy. It makes scrawling a swastika on something change from unthinkable to just dangerous. It means you might not take iron crosses all over a website as a warning sign that you should immediately leave, and if you don't leave, you might start reading and buying into hateful ideas there. It seems like such a small and simple thing, but it's things like this that erode our safeguards against dangers we sacrifice so much to fight. By the time you've played 100 hours of being a Nazi, their voice stabs become memes and in-jokes with your friends. By the 1000th time you've respawned as a terrorist, you're either celebrating them or making fun of them. Neither of which helps the global crisis we have that takes thousands of lives every year.
This is a fallacious argument known as the slippery slope. For those who don't know, the slippery slope fallacy is when you argue that if we allow A to happen, it'll lead to B, then C, and eventually to Z. So, using a long string of hypotheticals, they've gone from A, Nazis in video games, all the way to Z, global crisis. Now, their argument could have some merit if they had evidence this would likely happen, but they provide none throughout this video. And what can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that extra credits is correct. Nazis and terrorists in video games will contribute to a global crisis. Then you have to wonder why they'd willingly do paid promotion for World of Tanks.
This little holiday special is brought to you by World of Tanks.
This series is brought to you by World of Tanks PC. This series is brought to you by World of Tanks PC. Sponsored by World of Tanks. Sponsored by World of Tanks.
A video game where you can drive tanks used by Nazi Germany, and it's treated no differently than playing for the British. You might even call them functionally interchangeable? But I guess with all that sponsorship money, extra credits will make an exception.
So what do? That's easy. Don't make them morally equivalent. Don't make there be no in-game moral difference between your Nazis and your allies, between your terrorists and your counter-terrorist squads. Frame PvP as a training exercise, or simply take one of your non-odious sides and recolor them so that it's red versus blue, rather than Axis versus allies.
And if a developer wants to make their game that way, that's totally fine. But unless you can demonstrate not doing so will lead to real-world harm, they have no obligation to follow guidelines like that.
And if you decide that you need to have both sides be playable, don't make them interchangeable. Don't have players randomly spawn in as one or the other. Allow players to choose which side they're on. Now, of course, this has all sorts of in-game problems, such as creating shorter wait times for fascists, but you know what? Those wait times could be artificially extended.
Because that's what gamers want. Politically motivated wait times, punishing players for making choices you don't like. Considering how much gamers already enjoy loading screens, I'm sure they'll adore this idea.
And if you're going to say, but we need it for historical reasons, then your game better actually be historical. You can't really just hide behind the fact you called your desert map El Alamein and say, but it's historical. If that were the case, you need your PvP to at least represent real historical events and be a realistic take on those battles. Once you make both sides balanced, it's also no longer historical. And you can't really say that you need Nazis anymore for historical accuracy. Oh, and once you let players get cool weapons that weren't actually at that particular battleground, it's also no longer historically accurate. And you can't declare that your game will suffer if you don't put players in the jackboots of the Third Reich. And once your map is something carefully designed to have good gameplay by a team in a room in San Francisco or LA, and it's not a faithful reconstruction of the actual places the historical events occurred in, you can no longer say we need to have players take up arms in service of terror or hate.
This argument is yet another fallacy called black or white, aka a false dilemma, where you present two choices as the only possibilities when in fact more exist. A video game is not restricted to historical or non-historical. There can be varying degrees of historical accuracy. For example, in film you have historical fiction. Movies that take place during a historical period, but the characters and plotline are mostly fake. Moving forward, you have biographical films, which are mostly accurate, but the story tends to be dramatized. And finally, you have documentaries, which are about as close to reality as you can get. But even in the least accurate of World War II media, the bare minimum you can do is include some damn Nazis.
And look, we're not saying we can't have games about World War II or about terrorism. We're not even saying we shouldn't make games where you play as a Nazi or a terrorist. But what we are saying is that the fact that you're playing as a Nazi or a terrorist in a game has to mean something.
And it already does mean something. It means the developers and/or the consumers wanted that in their game. That is the only reason they need. If that reason isn't good enough for you, then vote with your wallet and don't buy the game. Now, some of you may think I'm not being charitable enough. Their video couldn't be this bad, right? Surely I'm misconstruing their argument. Well, 1, then go ahead and watch it for yourself, and 2, here is a tweet from their communications director. "We love losing all the bigoted subscribers. Are you kidding me? Less bigotry is great." That's right, everyone. If you unsubbed from their channel, it couldn't be because you have valid grievances with their video, it's because you're a bigot. This reminds me of a George Orwell quote. "The word fascism has now no meaning, except insofar as it signifies, quote, something not desirable." But contrary to what Extra Credits would like to believe in their echo chamber, the negative feedback to their politically correct spiel lines up fairly accurately with public opinion. According to a poll conducted last year, 80% of Americans believe that political correctness is a problem. The gaming community has spoken, and they're not buying what you're selling. If there's one thing we do have to stop normalizing, it's censorship.